Kenapa orang mencuri? Kenapa orang berbohong? Kenapa orang korupsi? Kenapa orang membunuh? Kenapa orang tetap melakukan dosa? Padahal menurut agama, setiap manusia akan mendapatkan balasan setelah mereka meninggal. Jawabannya sederhana. Karena manusia tidak percaya. Tapi lebaran ini, Anda akan percaya.
Ada?
Siksa kubur, Anda akan percaya.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Guts. This is Mike. Joining me as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, fanatical atheists. Before today, I didn't know that atheists could be so fanatical, but yeah, I learned something. I'm doing all right. How the hell are you doing, Mike?
Pretty good. Also with us, it's Don and Nelly. What's up, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right. Well, in the season of many theatrical releases, we still have those isolated weeks where there was nothing that released, and we turned to VOD. And lucky for us, maybe. I think our track record would say lucky for us, but we'll find out soon that we got a new Joko Anwar movie that dropped on Netflix of all places, and it kind of maybe Dawn knew more about it coming out, but like
I
to
don't
me
have
it kind of
Netflix.
dropped with
Why the
little
hell would I know
fanfare.
what was going on?
Well, just the
I don't-
knowledge of
I don't
Asian
have
horror.
Netflix. I don't have Netflix. Why the hell do you assume I know what's dropping on there?
Because
Because we
cover
follow
Asian horror.
But
I
still,
knew
it's a service-
was putting
it's a
something
service-
out this year. I just didn't know it was going to be on Netflix either. So
Yeah, I'm not assuming
don't
you
have
watched it already, but just
I don't have the service. I don't know what's dropping on there. And Netflix does such shit jobs with their promotional service anyway.
right. I think Mike's just questioning whether you knew Joko even had a new movie coming out, because usually you're on top of the Asian cinema releases. I don't think this has anything to do with Netflix.
yeah.
I
More the
knew the only
movies.
thing I knew was the anthology series. The movie's a total shock.
Yeah.
Well, yep, that makes three of us. So the movie we are referring to is Grave Torture. At least that's the English title. My laptop's a little far away from me, so I can't even read the original title.
Siksa Cooper.
Siksa Cooper. Okay. And the synopsis is not really a synopsis, but I'll read the sentence. Telling about the punishment of the grave which occurred after a man was buried. Okay.
That's not a complete sentence.
Yeah, it's words.
That's not even grammatically correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Words formed together. Okay. Well, we will get right to it then with our general thoughts. Venom, what did you think of Grave Torture?
This was an interesting film because this was probably the slowest burn of any of Joko's movies that I've seen. Mind you, it's not like I've seen all of his films, but obviously the big ones, both Satan's Slaves movie, Impetigore, some of his shorts here and there I've seen. I just recently watched Jenny, which was a short he did, I think, in like 2016 or something like that. So this is obviously this is a director I'm familiar with. It's a director that I'm always excited about when he puts out a new film. So as far as Grave Torture goes, like I said, this is probably the slowest film of his that I've ever seen. It takes a long time to really get to the quote unquote action of the film. The first half hour of the film is almost like a cold open. It's not really a cold open. It's just a a part of the film that takes place a good 10, 15 years before the bulk of the events of the film occur. And what I found funny is that there was no kind of on-screen indication that there was a time jump. Like, we just had to assume that Nurse Sita was also the same Sita from, when she was a child, which isn't that much of a stretch, obviously, but it's one of those things where if you're not paying attention, it's like, whoa, what happened? Where are we now? Like I said, a little bit of a slower burn. Still great performances, as always, with all of Joko's movies. I have a little bit of an issue with this one because this one definitely leans into religious horror, and not to say that this is the first time Joko has leaned into religious horror, but the way that he leans into this one, I'm still kind of on the fence. I've only seen the movie once. I literally just finished watching it about 20 minutes ago. There's some great set pieces. There's a couple of really cool kill scenes. But like I said, the movie is 2 hours. It's a couple of minutes. It's a shade under 2 hours. And it just takes a long time to get to. And once we get to it, it is fun. I will say that. Like, that third act does really bring it. And especially the final set piece just really, really brings it. It's just a matter if viewers are going to find the last, 15 to 20 minutes worth waiting through the first, hour and a half to hour 40 minutes. Not this, I'm not saying that it's a dull film. I'm not saying that nothing happens. I'm saying that this is a fairly slow burn. We get a lot of long, drawn-out sequences in the nursing home, especially after we get that time jump. But like I said, overall, I still really enjoy it. I try to say that I curb my expectations, but when I hear a name like Joko Anwar or, any of the other directors that I, genuinely love, I tend to get excited about the film. And maybe I got myself a little too psyched up for this one, because this is definitely not Satan's Slaves. It is not Impetigore. It is a much slower burn. It is solidly a religious horror film. And depending on how you look at religion in the real world could affect how you take the ending of this film. I mean, if you take it at face value, it's still fun. Our main character kind of, fucked around and found out, if you will. And I did leave satisfied. Like, when the movie was over, I was satisfied with it. I did like the ending. There's a little bit of a sting at the end that, you guys know how I feel about those little stings at the end that, make it seem like the film isn't over or like they're setting up a sequel or something like that. So this is a movie that's going to take a second watch. I'm going to have to really watch this one again. Now that I know the basic story, I know where the movie goes, I think I might be able to appreciate it a little bit more on first watch. But after a second watch, excuse me. But after my first watch, my guttural reaction is this is a fairly slow film, still very well shot. I mean, it's still a Joko Anwar film. It has his DNA all over it. The atmosphere, the tension, the set pieces. It definitely feels like one of his films. It just maybe doesn't have as much as some of the others. Like, I praised Satan's Slaves for its variety of antagonists, and how that was like a no waiting needed type film. Like within 15, 20 minutes, you're right into the bulk of the story, and there's already horror set pieces going on. This one, like I said, the first half hour, all we really get is the image of a ghost. That's it for the first half hour. And then once we get our time jump, we still go probably a good 15, 20 minutes before anything remotely supernatural happens. So like I said, if you can get through this long run time, I think you're going to get a lot out of the third act, especially if you're a fan of Joko. If you're not necessarily a fan of his or are unfamiliar with his work, I would strongly recommend not starting with Grave Torture. Go back to Satan's Slaves, Impetigore, Satan's Slaves 2. Check out some of his, more critically acclaimed films. Like this film actually only has a 6 on IMDb right now, which is a fairly low rating for a Joko Anwar film. I mean, even Impetigore was like a 7.3 or something like that on IMDb. And granted, I don't put a lot of stock into IMDb ratings ultimately, but man, I'm just, like I said, I feel bad that I don't like this movie as much as I wanted to. I do enjoy it, my friends. I absolutely enjoy it. I'm maybe a half step below loving it. Like I said, if the action was a little bit more frequent, maybe, I don't know, maybe cut some of this runtime off. I don't usually have any issues with 2 hour plus movies. I legitimately don't. If it's worth watching, I have no problem with the long runtime. This one, like I said, in the second act, I started to kind of feel like, man, this is really dragging. Like just watching Sita, go through her day-to-day life as a nurse. It's not until a major event, a major character dies in the film, that the movie really, really kicks into gear. So, like I said, if you're okay with the longer run times, you're a fan of Joko, I would still strongly recommend checking this out. It's currently on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix account or access to one, there's no reason why you shouldn't check it out. But like I said, that 2 hour runtime can be daunting for some viewers. And I understand that. Sometimes we just don't have 2 hours to sit in one spot and watch a film. But if you do and you are a fan, then I would absolutely say this is one worth checking out. I still, if we rated our films, a 10-point system, I would probably still rate this fairly high, but it wouldn't be up, with some of the numbers that I gave to some of his previous films where, I was giving them like 9s and 10s and whatnot. This one would be a little bit lower, but still a, solid film, good story, not too convoluted, even though it's a long film with multiple, time periods covered. It's not too complicated of a story to follow. The ending, totally makes sense. It's not like you're scratching your head wondering what happened. I just wish the runtime was a little bit shorter. I wish the pace was a little bit peppier, and I do wish there was a little bit more of the horror set pieces, because there's really only like 2 or 3 major ones here, as opposed to some of his previous films. So I know I sound like I'm down on the film. It's just that when you compare a movie like this to some of his previous work, you can see where it kind of pales a little bit. But it's still a solid film, really well done. Oh, and the sound design especially I loved. Like the entire scene inside of the grave, the sound design in there is spectacular. So I will give the movie its due where it deserves. But like I said, a little bit slower pace. If you can handle that, I think you will be rewarded with that absolutely insane third act and that final scene, which, really is, at least in my opinion, it was worth the wait. It's a matter of if that's the same opinion that other horror fans would have. So I'll leave my general thoughts at that for now. Good, maybe a hair short of great. So back to you, Mike.
All right. We go to our next general thoughts participant, Don and Ellie. What did you think of Grave Torture?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar with Venom, not just in terms of how I feel about Joko's filmography, but the film in general. The first two Satan Slaves films are like the pinnacle of modern Indonesian genre cinema, as long as, with the Queen of Black Magic remake. That's kind of like the holy trinity of modern Indonesian cinema. I love the two of them, part one especially over part two, but yeah, there's a lot to like there. Impetigore's just a step below, but it's still very high up there, and it actually does get better on repeat viewings, and I really like that one a lot more second time around. This one's kind of a little underwhelming. Like you said, it takes so long before anything really happens. We get this huge, complicated backstory with Sika and her brother. We get to see them as kids, and see what goes on with them, and we get to see all the events that led to her religious beliefs, all of the different encounters and interactions that go on, and then it just drags itself down with all of the nursing sequences, and just a lot of that probably could have been handled in like 2 or 3 sequences less, not have as much, but kind of cram a couple of them together and sort of add them together into like one big sequence and not just have, like all of these like individual sequences just clogging up the runtime. We get it. She's not necessarily involved in this religion. We get the point. It's just it adds too much to the runtime to keep hammering the same point over, and it's not even really doing that in any kind of enhanced kind of set pieces either, where we get a little bit more, and we find out why she feels this way, or we find out how she came to be like this. We kind of already get the point, and it just keeps hammering it home and hammering it home and hammering it home, and then it just kind of runs itself into the ground, and it just feels repetitive and redundant and just drags the film off. A lot of this could have been trimmed down, and it could have clocked in or probably like around 140, 145 just by trimming some of those sequences down. But yeah, I do like the third act. I do enjoy where it goes. I do think that that's the saving grace of the movie. Some of the scenes, I don't think they hit the highs that Satan Slaves or even Impetigore hit, but they're still genuinely solid. Some of the otherworldly sequences in particular are pretty gnarly and effective, and they look really creepy and eerie, and they have that distinctive touch that Joko puts on it. But yeah, it's just the tempo and the pacing to this one. It feels overlong, and it drags itself out, and really could have used an editor and trimmed this thing down, or put a couple of the conversations together into one big sequence and just kind of give us overarching view of who she is and why she's like this, instead of dragging it off into like, I think there was like at least 5 or 6 different sequences. I mean, there could have been more, but there was at least 5 or 6 different times where she and her colleagues are coming together and talking about what's going on. And yeah, it just really makes the film feel like a slog at times. And yeah, it's definitely one that feels its runtime. It's definitely a bit too beefy and girthy, if lack of a better term. But yeah, it still has its moments. I mean, we still get to know who she is, and we still get all of the background information we need, but it's just done it's just hammered home beyond the point of it being effective. So if you're fine with that, it's definitely worthwhile. If you're coming into this expecting, another Impetigore or another Satan Slaves, it's probably going to be a disappointment, because it is a noticeable step down. It's not a complete write-off, but it is the bottom tier for those ranking his movies. It's definitely the bottom end of the movies. I mean, something had to be, just based on the run he was on, but like I said, you could probably do a lot worse than this, just because the effectiveness of the third act is still really enjoyable. Those are some of the better points in the movie, but it does have the bottom spot on his movies, and it's not really one where it's on the lower end because it's bad. It's just on the lower end by default. So you can do a lot worse. It definitely has its moments, but I would definitely stick to the others if you haven't seen them. So otherwise, I guess that'll be pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I feel like Joko fell into the trap that a lot of directors fall into, where their first movie or their first couple of movies are so highly acclaimed by critics and fans that we almost expect too much. I mean, look at Jordan Peele. His first movie was Get Out, which won a goddamn Oscar. First horror movie in over 10 years to win an Oscar. So whenever Jordan Peele releases another movie, it's like we all want it to be another Get Out. And if it's not the quality of Get Out, people start to, feel like he failed or disappointed his fans, even though I love all 3 of his films. Obviously, if you check the ratings out on like Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, you see that the ratings go down as the movies, come along. So I feel like with Joko putting out, I mean, Satan Slaves is an absolute masterpiece. It is a fucking 10 out of 10 from beginning to end. It is just a spectacular film. I can't say enough good things about it. Maybe maybe because he put out such a spectacular film early on, we as the fans maybe are expecting too much. And I always say that I try to curb my expectations. I try not to suffer expectations, but sometimes, man, you can't avoid it. If you're a big Stephen King fan and a new Stephen King adaptation comes out, you want to see it and you want it to be good. You're hoping against hope that it's great. And I think that's where Joko is now, where every time he releases a movie, we as his fans want something of the quality of Satan's Slaves, and it's impossible. He can't make a 10 out of 10 movie every time he comes up to bat. So I just wanted to throw that point in there too. So nothing against Joko necessarily. It just like I said, if this would have been his first film, we probably would be praising it. And then if he would have moved on to then Satan's Slaves and other stuff, we would be talking about that natural progression. But because his first couple of movies, like I said, Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, their first movies were so great that people expect too much when they release a new one. And sadly, I think that may have been what happened for me on this one. I wanted this to be so much more than it was. And now it sounds like we're kind of shitting on it, even though we're not. We're objectively saying it's a good film, well worth watching, just not one of his best. And sometimes that could come off as negative. And, hopefully no one thinks that we're being negative, because this doesn't change my opinion of Joko. I still absolutely adore the man, and I still look forward to everything that he releases. So, like I said, I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. 'Cause I was just gonna say it's okay because I don't really have much to add that hasn't been already said. I thought it was good, not great, definitely a step down. I know it's possible to fall into that trap, like you were saying, but I think in this case it's just a matter of fact that it is a step down. Good, it's good though. It's definitely a slow burn. I would even call it a little bit of a slog to get to the third act. There is a great death in it. Might be one of my favorites of the year. So like that definitely like raised an eyebrow when that happened, but it does take a long time to get to it. But yeah, like I don't know. You guys pretty much said everything I was gonna say about it. I feel like this one, like Satan's Slaves, when I was done watching that, not only did I think it was great, but like it kind of left like an impression, and maybe it's because that was like the first movie from him, so you kind of go through the whole like, oh my god, what else has he done? I gotta look him up. I gotta figure out if there's other movies from this guy that I want to see. So obviously there's that effect, but also I just think Satan's Slaves was just that damn good. And this one, I would probably say if you're gonna show someone that's never seen his movies, don't start with this one. I would say start with Satan's Slaves, because then you're showing what the guy's really capable of.
I actually disagree with that. I think it's actually better to start them with a lower tier film than to start them off with the all-time classics to begin with.
Yeah.
What you're actually doing is you're giving them the impression that that's their quality of work the entire time out. So there's no bar there's like a impossible bar for them to be set. If you lower their expectations to say, here's something you might like, you give them the wiggle room to be able to discover something on their own that maybe they like more. And that way they have a more realistic expectation. If you show them something that it's not going to be topped, so then they'll have it when they finally start watching their stuff and they realize that the new stuff that they're watching doesn't clear what you showed them to begin with. That kind of gives them the expectation, well, they're just a one-trick pony because the one thing that I saw the first time is the best I've ever seen from them. So that way, when they go out and explore on their own, they have the chance to see something that may be better, and then they'll have a better appreciation for it on their own because they've seen something that actually blew them away that they weren't expecting based on their first impression.
Honestly, I think I'd rather split the difference. I would probably say don't start with Satan's Slaves or Grave Torture. I'd say start with Impetigore, because that's a solid film, really good. It's not a 10 out of 10 necessarily, but it's up there. It's a damn good film. My only concern would be that if I were to suggest Grave Torture to someone first, that if it doesn't work for them, they won't want to give Joko another chance.
Yeah,
So
that'd be my
I wouldn't
issue.
necessarily want to recommend his lowest rated movie because, you know, hell, they might. I could see some horror fans not even finishing this movie. Like, they might not even get to the third act because they just get bored, confused, or frustrated, whatever the case may be. So yeah, I would say split the difference on that one. But
Yeah,
again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just watch Joko Anwar movies, damn it, if you haven't already.
yeah, that would be my only issue with recommending this one first, only because to me, compared to his other movies, this one is such a slow burn to get through before you get
Mhm.
in the, I wouldn't want to give the impression that like all his movies are like that, because while you can say the other ones, the movie, there's a nice slow build to them. I think out of everything I've seen from him, this one is definitely like the slowest, as in
Mhm.
like I don't want to say nothing's happening, but like it's
Very little.
yeah, it's a slower pace crawl, definitely. But yeah, splitting the difference is fine as well. I mean, because I understand Don's point. You don't want to start with like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
here's the best, and it's all downhill from here. But you want to at least give them something that'll hook them in to say, okay, I want to see more from this person.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one thing I've always never understood is why somebody would want to start them at the very top. Like, there's no room for them to breathe. Like, everything has to be better than this, or it's not worth my time. And
Mhm.
if you're starting at the very top and you have nowhere to go but down, you're going to give them a distasteful impression because, well, everything I've seen, it hasn't been better than this. So why am I going to bother?
No, that's valid. I think we all have valid, you know, concerns with what we recommend. I mean, I tend to lean towards chronological. So, like, if somebody asks me how, you know, what should I start with, I would say start with his first couple of movies, you know, even if those first couple of movies are some of his best, at least they see a natural, you know, chronological progression in his skills. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this, to what a
Yeah.
non-fan should watch first. Ultimately, I hope it wouldn't be grave torture because I wouldn't want them to get jaded. And like Mike said, I wouldn't want them to think that all of Joko's movies are slow because they're not. They, you know, they start out quietly, yes, but slow is something I would never call Impetigore or Satan's Slaves. They start out slower, sure, but they definitely don't make it wait as long for the horror set pieces to start up as they do in this one. Like I said, for the whole first half hour, we get one image of a ghost, and that's it. And then for the next half hour after that, I don't even think we get any horror. It's literally just a lot of back and forth between Sita, her brother, Sita's plan, you know, what she's trying to do, all that stuff. It's not, for my money, the movie doesn't start to get really fun until Sita admits to the old man that she knows who he is. Like, at that moment, that's when the ear to ear grin showed up on my face, because I am a petty, vindictive asshole. So to actually watch Sita call out the old man on all his previous bullshit just made me happy as shit. I just wish, because of who I am and because of the way that I look at religion, the ending of this movie kind of contradicts everything that I believe. But again, it's a movie, it's fiction. It's not like it's a documentary or anything like that. So I have to just accept what Joko has presented to us. And again, I'm not necessarily complaining about what he's presented to us. It is objectively a good film. It's just, you know, we've all said it. It's maybe a half step, you know, down from some of his previous amazing films. So yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to that question ultimately. But ultimately, like I said, just watch his damn movies. Who cares what order? Just don't watch Satan's Slaves 2 first, because then you won't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, that's a caveat
True.
there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we can all agree on that one.
Oh, were you done, Mike? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was pretty much done with general thoughts.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like Sita a lot because she is me. I'm the kind of person that would question religion. I'm the kind of person that would see, you know, granted, I didn't lose my parents at an early age by any stretch, but I'm the kind of person that sees atrocities in the world and questions how anyone can believe in a God. You know, how can you believe in a God that killed 600,000 Americans in 1 year with some virus? You know, how can you believe in a God that would allow terrorists to fly a plane into some of our tallest buildings in New York? You know what I mean? It's events like that that make people question faith and religion. On top of the fact that I was already questioned. I mean, I've never been a religious person, for those who know me. You know, it's not like even though my parents were Catholic, it's not like I went through confirmation or any of those, you know, crazy Catholic rites of passages by any stretch. So I've always been a doubter. But the whole point is that I like Sita as a character because of her doubt, the doubt that she puts into her own head about religion, about the grave torture, you know, the reality of the grave torture. Is it a real thing? And yeah, we haven't even talked about that yet. The title of this movie actually does imply actual torture. It almost sounds like a metaphor, grave torture, but no, we're actually talking about people that have just died being tortured in their caskets in the ground before they are sent to hell or purgatory or wherever it is that they were being sent. So like I said, I like the story. I like Sita. I'm not the biggest fan of Adil, but at the same time, Adil went through a very traumatic event early on, which, you know, I won't spoil now, but he obviously went through a very traumatic physical event early on, and I have no idea what that would do to someone's psyche. And it seems like it turned Adil into like a wishy-washy little coward, basically. And he already, you know, to an extent, based on the open of the movie, he already was kind of a standoffish kid, you know, not ultra brave, blah, blah, blah. So I had some issues with Adil, but at the same time, I also appreciate that what happened to him has never happened to me. So I don't know what that would do to your psyche. I'm sure it would fuck you up in multiple ways. So I have to accept that even though I don't like Adil, it could have been a very accurate portrayal of someone who's gone through that kind of traumatic event early on. So yeah, so I did want to point out that I love Sita. I love her pursuit of the truth. I love the reason why that she's pursuing the truth. I'm just not happy with what she found out. That's all. All right, what do you say, guys? Anything else you want to add before we get into our walkthrough?
Nothing I can think of without spoiling anything.
Michael?
Nope, we're good.
All right, well, let's get into it then. Obviously, this is a 2-hour movie, so I'm going to try to zip through this walkthrough as quickly as I can. It is a slower burn film, so obviously I'm not going to go through all the slow scenes. Basically, our film opens up with an idyllic family scene. We see a family of 4, a mom, a dad, a daughter, and a son, and they are running a bakery. They own a bakery, and they're talking about some hard financial times that they've been having lately. Apparently, somebody started a nasty rumor about their shop, and they've lost a lot of their sales. And a competitor opened a donut shop right next door that's doing crazy business because of this nasty rumor that was started about this shop. So it's basically just, you know, the first like 5-10 minutes of the movie is just this idyllic family just having a nice morning, getting the bakery ready to open. And then when they open, yeah, the shit kind of hits the fan. Basically, we get 3 people come into the store. 2 of them they're very obviously plotting something. You know, they're looking around. They seem shady. What ends up happening is 2 of them, a man and a woman in the group, end up getting into an argument, a very loud argument. That argument is meant to be a distraction, to distract all the employees in the bakery so that the third person in their party could take some money out of the register, which he does end up doing. The third person ends up reaching into the register and grabbing some money, but he actually gets caught by Sita. And this is young Sita. At this point, Sita's probably like, 13, 14 years old. Her brother is like maybe a year older than her. She ends up trying to stop the guy. She grabs his hand, but obviously this is an adult male against a little girl. Obviously the guy's going to win. And he actually like begs her to let him take the money, that, you know, he wants bus fare. He's like, oh, we need bus fare. Please let us just have it. She obviously can't hold him. He eventually pulls away from her and starts to walk out of the store. She walks over to her older brother, Adil, and tells him that guy just stole money out of the register. But Adil does nothing. He just kind of freezes. He just sits there like, okay, I don't know what to do. And eventually, what ends up, while this is all happening, another stranger walks into the bakery. This guy is a little bit younger and he's got headphones on, but he's acting really strange. He starts coughing at one point and Adil offers him a cup of water. And then after the water, the guy starts speaking very cryptically. He starts telling Adil, I didn't know if it was real, but now that I know it's true, I have to do what I have to do. You know, I have to complete my plan. And then the guy pulls out his Walkman and pulls a cassette tape out of the Walkman and puts it on the counter like he's giving it to Adil. And he basically says, this is proof of what I now know is true. He doesn't tell him what's on the tape. He just says that. This is proof that I now know that, you know, this actually occurs. The guy ends up walking out of the store, and then right after that is when we get the scene with the, you know, the guy taking money out of the register. When Sita tells her parents that the guy stole money out of the register, they actually give chase. They actually run out of the store and try to stop the thief. But then out of nowhere, and I mean literally out of nowhere, there's a massive explosion that literally leaves everyone outside the store. The scammers, and then the parents, literally leaves them a fucking blood stain on the ground. I mean, it's like the bomb went off right next to them. We find out through a news report that it was a suicide bomber, and it turns out it was the guy who handed Adil that cassette tape. Basically, he's claiming that he has proof of grave torture. We don't know what grave torture is yet, but we will find out very soon here. So, like I said, the kids are now parentless. They are now orphans. Their uncle ends up sending them to a private school, an Islamic private school too. And mind you, these kids were not religious, or at least it's not implied in that opening scene that they, you know, were raised religious. So now they're kind of forced to be religious. And we see Sita wearing a hijab, I believe that's what it's called, one of those head coverings that Islamic women wear. And she's being lectured to by her instructor, and her instructor is basically talking about grave torture. And what grave torture is anybody who's lived a bad life or has done bad things in their life and has not sought retribution before their death will be visited once they are buried in the ground, and they are visited by a quote-unquote angel. The angel will ask them a series of questions, the first one being, who is your God? And the instructor is explaining to Sita and the rest of the class that if you don't have faith and you lie to the angel and say that, you know, Allah is my God, but the angel realizes that you're lying, basically they torture you. And one of the tortures that she describes is that the casket will actually shrink while you're inside of it, to the point that it just crushes your bones, crushes your body. And she talks about there's multiple series of torture, but she only specifically talks about that one. Now, Sita, obviously, after losing her parents to a suicide bomber, has no interest in religion whatsoever. And she basically contradicts the nun, the instructor, basically telling her, well, you know, I don't, what happens if you don't have faith, or what happens if you do have faith? Like, why would this angel be visiting you unless you were a lost cause already, is kind of one of the things that she's kind of questioning. Eventually, she gets into a kind of a disagreement with the teacher, and she's just kind of, you know, reprimanded, basically, you know, being told, you know, you have to believe, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, this is a religious school, so they have no interest in atheists here. You have to believe or you're out. And obviously, with Sita and Adil being orphans, if they get kicked out, they become wards of the state. So they end up having to go to like an orphanage, which may be even worse. Who knows? So what ends up happening is that night, Sita decides that she wants to leave. That they want to leave that school. It's too religious for them. They want to get out of there. But there's only two ways out. The first one is through the front gate, which is heavily guarded, you know, by actually armed guards. Then the other way out is through a haunted tunnel, a tunnel that supposedly everyone avoids. Because the rumor is anyone who's ever gone into the tunnel has never come out. Obviously, Sita, not believing in religion, also doesn't believe in the supernatural. So she just, powers her way into the tunnel. Adil obviously is timid. He's scared. He doesn't want to go. Eventually, Adil and Sita end up getting separated in the tunnel. And then Sita ends up running into our ghost, the ghost that I mentioned, in this first half hour of the movie. The ghost introduces himself as Ismail and basically is asking for help. But Sita is basically a little girl, so she's not totally comprehending what she's seeing. Eventually, she walks up to this kid named Ismail and turns him around, grabs him by the shoulder and turns him around. That's when we see that he basically looks like a zombie. He looks dead. He's got damage on his face. His eyes are glossed over, blah, blah, blah. That ends up scaring her enough that she turns around and runs out of the tunnel. When she gets out of the tunnel, there's a deal with the headmaster of the school, the instructor, the nun that was instructing her earlier, along with a couple of the guards. So basically, Adil and Sita got caught. Now, at this point, since Sita has committed a sin, she now has to wear a red hijab instead of the white one that everyone else wears in the school. And this is to basically show that she has committed a sin. I jokingly in my notes called it the scarlet hijab because that's exactly what the scarlet letter was. Basically just a marking on the person to let other people know that, oh, she's a whore or whatever it was in the Crucible, I believe. In the Scarlet Letter, excuse me. That was actually the name of the story. My bad. Anyway, that night she overhears a conversation between two of the nuns. And one of the nuns, the younger one, basically is concerned because of what the owner of the school has been doing to the kids. They don't say specifically what it is, but I think a lot of us could probably assume what it is. We eventually find out that, yes, the owner of this school, and this guy's the owner. He's the actual guy who's providing the money, and it also turns out that he's sexually assaulting some of the boys in this school. And the younger nun actually says, well, what about Ismail? Where was his justice? Because she's trying to tell the older nun that we need to do something because everyone here knows what he's doing. It's like not even a secret really, but because he's the owner, he's the one paying everyone, he's the one providing everything for these kids. No one is calling him on his shit. So eventually that night, like I said, she's overhearing the conversation, and then the nurse or the older nun asks the younger nun, well, who does he want next? And the younger nun says Adil, and Sita overhears this, so she knows that her brother is about to, I don't know that she comprehends that it's a sexual assault necessarily, but she knows that something's about to happen to her brother and that it could turn into the Ismail situation where he obviously didn't survive his attack. So what ends up happening is, unfortunately, Adil is sexually assaulted. Basically, they start to drive him off campus. I don't know if they're gonna kill him and get rid of the body, or if they're just escorting him off campus so that he can't be any more trouble. But the point is, Sita ends up distracting the driver of the car. She throws a rock at the windshield, which cracks the windshield slightly. Then when the guy stops and gets out of the car, she throws a large piece of twig, like a tree branch. She throws it to the opposite side of the road that she's standing on. The driver hears it and goes looking to see, who threw the rock. Or it almost sounded like a gunshot too. Like the sound effect of the windshield cracking almost sounded like a gunshot. But it was obviously Sita doesn't have any weapons on her. While the driver is out investigating the noise, she goes to the car, grabs Adil out of the back seat. At this point, Adil is basically a zombie. Like his eyes are open, but he's not talking. He's not emoting at all. So eventually they end up running away and they end up going back to the tunnel. Same thing happens. They end up getting separated. She ends up running into Ismail. But this time, instead of turning around and running back, she continues running in the same direction. She ends up finding her brother. He's cowering on the ground, covering his ears because he can't handle the image or the sound of Ismail's voice. And as they start to approach the end of the tunnel, we hear Ismail's voice continue to call out for help. Please help me, help me. But obviously Ismail's a ghost, so Lord knows how you can help a ghost. Eventually they get to the end of the tunnel, and then bam, time jump. It's so abrupt you almost don't notice it. Literally, they go from the end of the tunnel when they get out of the tunnel, and suddenly it's a good, 15 years later. And we now see that Sita is a nurse at a nursing home, a convalescent home, with all of these, older folks, and she's basically taking care of them. We don't know. At this point, we don't really know what kind of plan or anything she has, but she does end up speaking to her brother, Adil, who, is still around. And she starts talking about what she wants to do. And what she wants to do is the reason that she took the job at the nursing home is because she's looking for evil people that are about to die. Because what she wants to do is she wants to prove that grave torture isn't true, that it's just fiction. So what she wants to do is she wants to find the most evil person that she could find. Well, my friends, she ends up finding the granddaddy of them all, because she ends up finding the guy who owned the school, the guy who actually raped Adil and killed Ismail and sexually assaulted over 50 kids, according to some of the reports in the movie. She ends up finding him, and in this glorious scene, this glorious petty scene, she calls him out. She's like, "What are you so scared of? What, are you scared because of the 50 plus kids that you molested while you were, at your school?" And he just freezes and doesn't say anything. And she's like, "What? Are you surprised that I know who you really are?" And the guy changed his name at this point too. It's not like he's using the same name that he used back in the day. So, he obviously, and he has kids now who obviously have money. I don't know. It's probably his money. I don't know if those kids are independently wealthy or not, or if it's the older guy's money. But yeah, she basically calls him on his bullshit, and then lets him know exactly what she's doing, that she's looking for evil people so that she can prove that grave torture isn't real. And the reason that she wants to do it's some kind of peace of mind thing that she wants. She wants to know that grave torture and religion in general isn't real, so that she feels a little bit better about the suicide bomber, because she believes that the suicide bomber did what he did for religious reasons. And he actually said that, because after a news report comes out after the suicide bombing that says that after the guy got the tape of the grave torture audio and started to believe that it actually exists, he wanted to make himself a martyr, hence suicide bombing. My friends, I don't know what the fuck kind of religion would allow someone to go to heaven after killing innocent people with a suicide bombing. I don't get it. I don't claim to understand religion, but in any way, shape, or form. But the whole time I'm watching this movie, what do you mean be a martyr? You're killing innocent people. You're not just killing yourself. On top of the fact that you are killing yourself, which in some religions means you go to hell. I know that's more of a, European thing, but still. So anyway, that's why she's trying to prove that grave torture doesn't exist, so that she can feel better about the fact that the guy was just crazy. She wants to believe that the suicide bomber was just nuts, that he was a religious zealot. So that's basically where we are. After Sita exposes the old guy, and I'm skipping set pieces here, folks. I'm skipping some, mild haunting scenes here and there, flashbacks, a lot of the insipid flashbacks that Don was talking about, just pounding the same fact home that, yes, she doesn't believe in religion. She wants to disprove it so that she can have a little bit of peace of mind about her parents' death. I don't understand how that's going to make her feel any better about her parents' death. But again, I don't claim to understand people by any stretch. So anyway, after exposing the old guy for what he is, he pulls out a gun and basically says, well, he basically starts talking about the fact that he doesn't believe in grave torture because he doesn't, the religion or the system, he doesn't even call it a religion. He says the system that I believe in says that I can kill, I can cheat, I can lie. and that, there's no repercussions afterwards. So he is kind of like Sita in the fact that he's kind of an atheist that doesn't really believe. And like I said, he pulls out the gun and he basically looks at Sita and says, well, I'll go ahead and, do a favor for you and, help you out on your quest. He takes the gun, puts it in his mouth, and unceremoniously pulls the trigger. So, yeah, the owner of the school who was molesting all of those kids, boys, mind you, they were all boys that he was molesting, is now dead. So, because this is a nursing home, and a lot of the people in the nursing home don't have families to like claim the bodies or whatever, they have a little cemetery there behind the nursing home. In this case, the old guy does have a couple of kids, which we meet earlier in the film, which, by the way, there's a scene where the daughter of the school owner tries to disrespect Sita, and Sita puts her in her place so fucking gloriously. I was so happy. This is one of the scenes that makes me love Sita. I love Sita as a character. I really do. Without fear of getting fired or losing her job, she absolutely puts this bitch in her place, and I fucking loved it. And literally telling her, kneel and kiss my feet. Because of what I do. I take care of the sick and the elderly. You should be kneeling and kissing my feet, which, like I said, I absolutely love. So anyway, point is, the kids decide they don't want their dad's body. They had a bad relationship. They didn't really like each other. And at the same time, they don't even want the news released that he's dead. So I'm thinking that the kids are probably living off of dad's money. And because they didn't like each other, if he dies and they're not in his will, they lose everything. So that I'm figuring it's greed that's making the kids say, don't announce his death to anyone. So because they don't want the body and don't want his death announced, Sita and Adil decide to bury him next to a known serial killer in that cemetery. And Sita's plan, which seems like a weird plan to me, but whatever, her plan is that she's actually going to spend a night in the grave with the guy's dead body. He's not buried in like a casket or anything. He's literally just in the open ground. But they dig the hole wide enough so that Sita can sit in there as well with a camcorder so that she can record whatever may or may not happen. And if she goes the whole night with nothing happening, then, it'll make her feel better that there is no grave torture and there is no fucking, religion. She ends up spending the whole night in there with them and nothing happens. The next morning, Adil comes to get her, digs them back out. Basically nothing happens, and it's almost like she's not even really all that relieved. It doesn't even, like, she's still not satisfied. Like, she wants ultimate proof that none of this is real. But what ends up happening is then we start getting some weird set pieces where we start seeing a spirit clad in all black, not clothing. I mean, their skin. It's very demonic looking, sharp claws, everything. Starts making little appearances in the nursing home. I'm thinking, I think many horror fans are probably thinking that's the spirit of the old man coming back to fuck with Sita, because she called him out, even though she never really told anybody. It's not like she ratted him out publicly. She did this privately, so it's not like anyone knows who the old man is. He still is, considered honorable and a good man, blah, blah, blah. So after that, like I said, we start getting more appearances of this weird demonic spirit. At one point in the movie, one of the elderly women comes to Sita and says, my husband's cheating on me. And of course, Sita doesn't believe her because these are like octogenarians. These are very old people living in a nursing home. And even though, yes, this husband and wife are living at this nursing home together, the wife comes to Sita and says, my husband's cheating on me. He's cheating on me in that room right there. And she points at her room. So Sita goes to walk in. I'm thinking that she's going to see something supernatural. No, my friends, what we see is the old man, the old woman's husband, on his knees, and one of the nurses has her shirt open in front of him. We don't actually see anything because she closes it fairly quickly as Sita walks in. But yeah, you can see the embarrassment on both of them. The old man starts freaking out, starts talking about how, how pretty she is, and blah blah blah. He hasn't had attention from a woman in so long. But then he sees his wife out in the hall, and he realizes that he's caught, that his wife caught him cheating. And he starts begging for forgiveness. He starts like trying to grab his wife. Sita and some of the other patients, residents of the nursing home. I know they don't like to use the word patients. The residents of the nursing home basically split up. They help Sita to split up the husband and wife. The husband doesn't want his wife to be alone for the evening because he claims that she's clumsy and that she's going to hurt herself. But obviously the wife is like on the ground in the fetal position crying because her husband of 50 years just cheated on her. By the way, there's no way that was the first time that ever happened. It's not like a guy who's been happily married for 50 years suddenly decides to cheat. No, he's probably been cheating on her their whole damn marriage, I would believe. If I know men, I would probably say he's been cheating for a while. But anyway, they end up splitting them up, sending them on their separate ways. They put the husband in the room of the school owner because he killed himself the night before, so the room is now empty. So he's in there, and then they put the wife in her bedroom. But a weird thing happens as soon as the wife walks into her room. She kind of goes catatonic, and she literally urinates on herself. She just starts peeing right there on the floor. She's just standing there, and she just starts urinating. And then suddenly she starts vomiting up this like white stuff, almost like foam. It looks like she's foaming at the mouth almost, but she's not like violently puking. She's just standing there very quietly, just kind of letting it fall out of her mouth. Like that's why I'm saying that she seems almost catatonic. After a couple of minutes, she snaps out of it, realizes what she did, so she decides to take the clothes that she was wearing and go to the laundry room. She tries to do a load of laundry. She puts the dirty clothes in the laundry. She starts the cycle, but then she realizes her wedding ring isn't on her hand. So she starts freaking out. Where's my wedding ring? Where's my wedding ring? She starts to think that maybe she left it in the dress or the nightgown that she was already wearing when she threw up. So she opens up the washing machine, tries to grab, or she pulls out the nightgown, feels around, checks the pockets, realizes that the ring's not there. So then she starts reaching into the washing machine itself. And she's reaching with just her arm, and she's not finding anything. So then in her infinite wisdom, she decides to actually go into the washing machine. Like literally the whole top half of her body is in the washing machine. And suddenly nothing supernatural happens here, which, it almost supports the old man saying that his wife is clumsy. Because what ends up happening is she's not stuck in the machine necessarily, but she's in an uncomfortable angle. So she tries to pull herself out, but in pulling herself out, she accidentally hits the start button, which, by the way, we all know that the machine's not going to start if the door is open just because you hit the start button. But again, it's a movie, suspension of disbelief. I'll let it go. She ends up hitting the start button, and the machine starts spinning. The washing machine just literally starts spinning. It might be a dryer, actually, too. It might not even be a washing machine, but whatever. It's one of those front-loading ones, so it looks like a dryer. Like I said, she's in there, and suddenly she starts spinning with the inner, whatever we call that, the basin inside of the machine. As it spins, she's spinning with it. And then we start to see her hair get caught at the back near where the actual fan is, like for the dryer part. And then the machine stops. The machine stops on its own without her hitting the button. So I guess that's mildly supernatural. But then she's stuck. Her hair, by the way, I forgot to mention, this woman has hair down to her fucking knees. And I honestly didn't think older women liked having hair that long because of the trouble of just having to take care of it or anything. But yeah, this woman has long ass hair. It's like down to her knees almost. But of course, now the hair is caught on the back of the washing machine dryer. And she starts to just pull at it. And I'm like, no, don't pull. You're going to scalp yourself is literally what I said. And then literally she's pulling and pulling harder and harder. And we start to hear skin like separate, like crack, like flesh when it's torn apart. We start to hear that sound effect. And I'm like, oh boy, here it comes. She's about to get scalped. my friends, instead of getting scalped, her whole fucking face comes off. Literally, her entire head is degloved. I don't know if you guys out there know what degloving is. It's basically where you lose all of your skin on a certain part of your body. So like I've seen people like it stems from hand injuries in warehouses where people would literally have all of the skin from the wrist up pulled up off their hand, almost like they took a glove off. That's why it's called degloving. I think we saw something like that in Gerald's Game a few years back. But anyway, her head is literally faceless and she dies instantly, which is a gnarly fucking kill. It actually is a great looking kill to see that. They end up finding the body. The husband is pissed off at Nurse Sita because he's like, I told you she's clumsy. She can't be left on her own. He's crying. He starts talking about how I need to speak to my wife. I need to get her forgiveness. I'll never be at peace if I don't get her forgiveness. I'm sitting there thinking, fuck you. You don't deserve peace. You cheated on your wife of 50 years. You don't fucking deserve peace. But he's not even concerned about his wife. He's more concerned about his own soul and his own well-being. So just shows you how selfish, again, that guy is. So what ends up happening is they end up having a seance. As it turns out, one of the residents of the nursing home has a background in like, the metaphysical or whatever. So she actually does a seance and they invite Nurse Sita to join the seance. The whole point of the seance is so that they can contact Nani, which was the name of the old woman who had her face ripped off in the dryer, so that the husband can ask her for forgiveness, which I'm sitting there thinking that's so stupid, but whatever. Again, I'll deal with it. Obviously, nothing is happening as the seance begins because the woman running the seance basically tells Sita multiple times, you need to believe to see anything. You're not going to see anything until you believe. And don't forget, Sita is the ultimate non-believer. She doesn't believe in anything remotely supernatural or religious. But eventually she concedes, she closes her eyes, and she tries her hardest to try to believe. And eventually she looks over to her right and sees Nani holding her hand. It's supposed to be one of the older residents, but when she looks over, it's Nani. She still has her face on. I thought it would have been cool if they used the unfaced Nani image as the person standing next to her. I thought it would have been even creepier, but it's still pretty fucking creepy to see a woman who died in the previous scene sitting at the seance table. Instantly, Sita lets go, and she walks over to the window, opens up the blinds, and just tells the residents it's lunchtime, and just walks out of the room just kind of pissed off about everything. But right before Sita ended the seance, Nani, or at least we think it's Nani, the spirit of Nani, who is now speaking through the medium, tells her husband, I need you to kill that bitch. Kill the woman who seduced you, and then we'll be together in the afterlife. She basically says, well, we're never going to see each other again because of what you did. But if you kill her, we'll see each other in the afterlife. So instantly, I'm like, that's not your fucking wife. Your wife would never say that. But there it is. And then basically what ends up happening is exactly that. The next, it might even be that same night. It's either that night or the next night. But basically, Sita and the nurse that was, fucking around with the old man, they start talking about the nature of sin, and the other nurse asks Sita, well, who do you ask for forgiveness when you commit a sin? Which is an odd question to ask someone who's not religious, because we don't ask for forgiveness. If I do something wrong, I'm like Sita. Sita basically says, if I wrong someone, I apologize to them. I don't ask for forgiveness from some god. And that's kind of the way I am. If I wrong someone accidentally or intentionally, I apologize to that person. So, but then in the middle of their conversation, in comes the old man, the cheater old man with a knife, and he starts to attack the other nurse. Sita and the nurse end up getting out of the laundry room, because it is an old man, mind you, so they're able to thwart his attack fairly easily. I mean, like I said, he's an octogenarian at least. And they end up getting outside of the room. When they get outside of the room, they're holding the door shut, because the guy still has the knife in his hand and he's maniacally trying to get through the door. what ends up happening is the fucking nurse ends up getting stabbed by a different resident, another one of the residents that was at the seance. And basically he says, we needed to kill her because I don't want to go through grave torture. And it's like, well, dude, you just murdered someone. You literally just murdered someone because she had an affair with a guy. Like that's not a reason to murder someone, especially you. Like, you're not even part of the situation. You're just somebody else that was there. And just, a religious zealot who believes that if he doesn't do what the spirit asks of him, that, he's going to end up getting the grave torture too. He stabs the nurse just once, leaving the knife in her midsection. And then Sita starts saying, okay, I'll go get help. But the nurse is like, nah, why bother? Like, literally, the nurse is sitting there like, you know what? Life is too hard. Life is frustrating. Don't even bother trying to save me. And the last thing that Sita says is, but you have to live. You have to live. And the girl just looks at Sita and says, why? And then pulls out the knife and repeatedly stabs herself in the midsection over and over again until she finally loses consciousness and dies. So at this point, the adulterous nurse has now been murdered. The old guy, it doesn't seem like anything even happened to the guy who ended up stabbing her. At least we never see what ended up happening. Again, there's more set pieces, more hauntings, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Sita, I forget how the final scene starts. Like, I know she's oh man, what happens? Oh, right. She goes back to the grave. She goes back to the old man's grave, and she basically says, if this old motherfucker doesn't get grave torture, who else could? I mean, if this guy who literally assaulted over 50 young boys and killed one doesn't get his grave torture, then how can this be real? So she ends up going back to his grave, opening it up, and then looking inside and realizing there's no body. The body is gone. But then she ends up falling into the grave, and after she falls in, it starts to cave in on her. Like, literally the wooden boards that were on top to cover up the hole start falling in on her. Dirt starts falling in on her. But then she sees like a thin part of the wall that she could potentially get through. So she starts digging through it, and she ends up falling through the hole. And guess what? She ends up in the tunnel from when she was a little kid. So obviously Sita's in some kind of weird realm, or she's dreaming or something. There are multiple dream sequences in the movie too, where, Sita ends up waking up scared. One particular jump scare that I actually thought was kind of silly, but at least the movie's not filled with jump scares. There's only like a couple, and only one of them is kind of goofy, and it's one of the ones that wakes Sita up from sleep. Anyway, back to the grave, or back to the tunnel. She's now in the tunnel. She once again runs into Ismail, but this time there's also other kids there, and they're basically begging Sita to help Ismail, but she doesn't know how. She keeps asking how. Finally, Ismail himself is there, and he tells her, I'm scared. I want to get out of here. And Sita's like, well, what are you scared of? And the little kid just points up to the ceiling, and when the camera pans up, it's the old man. It's the school owner, the rapist. Literally just looking like he's totally alive, looking the way he did in that final scene before he shot himself. And he starts to give chase to Sita. Ismail basically says, thank you. You've helped me. There won't be any more victims, which is weird because she didn't really do anything. All she did was literally walk them to the edge of the walkway. When they get to the edge, there's like an opening, like a gap that she has to jump, and it looks far, and she doesn't think that she could make the jump. But Ismail literally tells her, if you believe you can make the jump, then you will. So as the old man is giving chase, the old rapist is giving chase, she decides to take a running leap, but she doesn't make the jump, and she ends up falling down the crevasse. When she lands, she's back inside the grave. and it's back to the original day where the body's still there. So the body is there, and she's now in the grave again. But this time, stuff starts to happen, and we start to hear the rumbling. We start to hear the earth shake. We start to see like dirt starting to cave in into the grave, and then suddenly the old man sits up. He does his best Undertaker impression, sits up, and just starts looking around like he doesn't realize that he's dead or whatever. But then suddenly we hear a voice, and the translation says, "Who is your God?" And the old man doesn't answer. So literally a fucking mace, a medieval mace, you know, one of those balls with spikes on it, comes flying into the old guy's head, literally completely caving in his fucking head. And then the mace is pulled away, and the old guy's face reforms itself. So this is literally like eternal torture. He's going to keep healing and just to get tortured again. Again, the voice says, "Who is your God?" And again, the old man doesn't answer. And again, the mace comes out, but this time the mace hits him like 6 or 7 times in a row. It's fucking gnarly. But again, his wound, the caved in face heals itself. And then finally we get to see the full image of the angel. And that's the black demonic thing that we had been seeing earlier in some of the set pieces inside of the nursing home. It's not the spirit of the old man like I thought it was. It is the angel. And this is the angel that's basically going to ask you the series of questions to see if you deserve to go to heaven. Obviously, this old guy doesn't know how to answer, so he keeps getting tortured. Eventually, a big fucking like sledgehammer shows up and like smashes his head up against the side of the fucking grave. Again, when the sledgehammer is moved, the head kind of reforms itself. Finally, the demon again, or the angel, I should say, the angel again shows up, asks him again, "Who is your God?" But he's not happy with the answer that the guy gives him. So he literally starts poking his eyes out with his long ass talon claws, just starts poking into the guy's head, pulling it out, letting it heal, then poking him again, just over and over again, just wrecking this guy's face. Eventually, the old guy starts saying, "I want to repent. Please, Lord Allah, forgive me for my sins." And he starts repeating that over and over while he's being tortured. Like as the mace is hitting him in the face, and as the sledgehammer smashes his head, and as the angel is poking his eyes out, he's literally, "Please forgive me. I wish to repent." And then suddenly Sita, who luckily the angel doesn't even acknowledge, which she's sitting there crying and screaming, and I'm like, "Shut up, dude. The angel hasn't noticed you. Maybe he won't." But the angel obviously isn't there for her. He's there for the old guy. And basically, after smashing the shit out of the old guy, the angel suddenly turns and looks towards Sita. And Sita basically gets freaked out. She goes to scream, but then suddenly Adil is there opening up the grave. My friends, she never left the grave. So this is basically a flatliners situation. Everything that happened up until the point that she got buried, or everything that happened after that point, never actually happened. It was all just in her mind. So literally, like I said, it's a flatliner situation where half the movie didn't actually happen. So the old lady didn't actually have her face ripped off by the dryer. Maybe the old man didn't cheat on her, or maybe he just didn't get caught in this scenario. But yeah, basically the movie ends with someone reading a book about grave torture, and then when they close the book, we see that it's the old lady's hand, the old lady who had her face peeled off. It's her hand. So it's basically letting you know that, yeah, she never died, because all the events of the movie after she was buried with the old man earlier in the film never actually happened. It was all in her head. So there you go. And our movie ends right there. Oh, no. And then after Adil and Sita get out of the grave and they start to walk away, suddenly something stands in their path and says, "Who is your god?" And then the movie fades to black, and that's the end. So obviously the angel did eventually take notice of Sita in there, even though Sita is technically not dead, unless she died in the first time that she got buried. Like, maybe she suffocated, maybe something bitter, like a snake or something, because there is a snake, there is a king cobra kind of perusing around some of these this cemetery. At first we think it's going to bite a deal, but then it ignores a deal and goes into the pipe, the air pipe that a deal built for her so that she could breathe while she was in there. So yeah, like I said, very flatliners, which I'm not complaining about. I love flatliners. And that's a scenario that hasn't really been utilized a lot lately in horror. In fact, I can't think of the last time that they used the fake out that, like the second half of the movie never actually happened. It was all, in her head or whatever the case may be, or it was part of her grave torture. That's another interpretation, is that was her grave torture because of the fact that she didn't believe. And as it turns out, grave torture and religion in this universe are real. Maybe, like I said, maybe that whole thing that happened after, the old woman getting her face peeled off and everything that happens after that, it could be a form of her grave torture. Because, like I said, the angel does acknowledge her at the very end of the movie and asks her, "Who is your god?" So there you go, folks. It's a story of someone who fucked around and found out.
Yes, it is, and it was a pretty neat conclusion. I mean, in a sinister way. I did like it, and I think, to reiterate what we all said, like, I would say the third act definitely makes everything worth it. So I would still recommend it. Like I said, Netflix is a service most people tend to have, or at least access to. So check it out, because a lot of times Joko Anwar's movies don't start on like a service that universally people have. It might start on like a horror specific service that people aren't going to necessarily sub to for like a specific movie, but the fact that this dropped on Netflix obviously puts it to a much wider audience.
Yeah. And if you are interested in checking out any of Joko Anwar's earlier films, they're all on Shudder. Satan's Slaves 2, Impetigore. I think there's one other one on there that I can't remember, but yeah, most of his stuff is on Shudder. So if you're interested and you have access, go check it out.
All right. That's going to wrap up. Oh.
No, I was just cheering that we're done.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure who that was. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our discussion on grave torture, but let's find out what we have. I know for sure we got one thing new, so Venom, why don't you tell everyone what that is?
Yes, just dropped today on the network. It is No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts, episode number 30, where Don, myself, and Mr. Derek B looked at Dwayne Johnson's Rampage, which was a much maligned creature feature from a few years ago. So we had our normal discussion on it and talked about, some of its pros and cons, and, spoiler alert, we all actually like it. But it is basically an American kaiju movie. It's kind of, sort of. So, I mean, it definitely tracks that we would all like it. But yeah, go ahead and check out that episode. It is available right now as we speak. And unfortunately, that's about all I have. I do have the movies that I've been assigned for both Cut to the Chase and Podcast Under the Stairs. As soon as those are recorded and released, I will let you guys know. But otherwise, that's all I have. Oh, we did record one last night, but I'll let Mike talk about it because Mike never has anything to talk about.
All right. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let me kick it to Don. Got anything new, Don?
Yeah, not much. As mentioned, Creature Comforts is now available. We're definitely excited to get that one out there. The latest episode of, or I shouldn't say latest episode, but a episode of Indie Film Cafe will have me on there. Should be dropping anytime now because it's October as you hear this, so should be any day now that mine gets released. Don't know the official day, but that one will be available sooner rather than later. I look at a film called A Feast of Flesh, which you'll hear about again when the time comes. And there should be, I will mention this, there is rumblings that I will be doing a guest spot for a friend of mine. I can't say much because we're still finalizing dates. We talked about it over the weekend, but I don't have anything else other than I will be appearing sooner rather than later on the Joe Blow Horror Show for a film of theirs this coming month. And the only other thing for sure is season 3 of Horror Countdown as we're winding down the year heading into season 4. But otherwise, that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Why we'll announce what Venom was alluding to, which is we finally got together to record the next episode of the main show, No More Room in Hell, number 62. That should be out sometime later this week or maybe the weekend. We'll see. So yeah, it was a couple months, over a couple months in the making. But we finally got together to make that happen. So we're talking a couple of Amicus movies. What else can I say about it? It was a fun time. It always is to get together and do it. And once again, we'll try to get the next one out in a quicker time frame. But that is it for me. Venom what are we at the end of? Well, actually, no, we'll be at the beginning of October by the time that this is end of this week. Is there a theatrical release this week?
Yeah, the biggest one I'm fucking waiting for. Yeah, dude, Terrifier 3 this Friday.
There we go. All right, yeah. Last week, yeah. Whatchamacallit came out. Azrael came out.
Yep.
So that'll probably be discussed. Well, I think I did bring it up on. Wait, did I bring it up? I can't remember anymore.
How?
But
It just came out on Friday.
no, on the main show.
Yesterday. Yeah, the main show.
I can't remember. I know I did all 2024 watches.
I don't think you brought it up. No.
Okay.
Because
yeah.
I don't remember you bringing it up. Yeah.
Okay.
You brought up 3 other movies you hated.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, yeah, it was just an odd movie out, Azrael. So, yeah, we'll definitely be covering Terrifier 3. Looking forward to that one. But other than that, October is going to be probably packed with theatrical releases, so expect a lot of trips. But other than that, that's going to wrap up this episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back in a week. Let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Don't bury yourself with a dead body. That just seems like a bad idea. Regardless of your intention, that just doesn't seem like a solid idea. So, yeah, let's avoid doing that.
Peace.